Hello everybody, welcome back. We are going to be looking at the NFC East today in my positional ranking series. The NFC East hasn't had a back-to-back division winner since the Eagles did it in 2003 and 2004, so it's definitely one of the more back-and-forth competitive divisions in the NFL. So we are going to be looking at every position and how the four teams in the NFC East stack up with their current rosters at each roster spot. So we're going to dive right into a very controversial one to start with, the quarterback position. And I think that there's really a case for one of two players right now. It's Jalen Hurts or Dak Prescott. Jalen Hurts definitely kind of came back to earth after a fantastic season 2 years ago. Last season was much less efficient, no Shane Steichen there, and Hurts did kind of regress back to the mean. He did have good stats still, 24 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, also had really good rushing totals as well, over 600 yards and ton of touchdowns as well. He just, he did turn the ball over a lot more, had 15 interceptions. He did struggle at times throughout the season to really get the offense going. I do think that he maybe isn't one of these elite quarterbacks that a lot of people thought he was, but I still think that he is a really good quarterback, and I do have him slightly above Dak Prescott. Now, Prescott had a sensational year last year as well. It just kind of comes down to, can he get it done when it really matters? And, I mean, when you look at the pure stats, he is really, really an impressive player. Threw for almost 5,000 yards last year. He had 39 touchdowns and 11 interceptions, so he definitely had a lot of success when it comes to the pure stats. He definitely put up great numbers, and he was able to get wins, get the Cowboys the division title last year. He really struggles in the playoffs. He really struggles to kind of have that clutch gene, really be able to make things count when it matters. And, ultimately, I do think he is a really good quarterback. I'm not sure he's an elite quarterback by any means, but I think that, that is definitely good enough for second. I think you could argue either way for the quarterback position, but I think those two are clearly at the top. And then looking up next, we've got the Commanders with Jaylen Daniels, or we've got the Giants with Daniel Jones. And I know it's hard to put a rookie above a player that has taken NFL snaps and, has at least shown some moments here and there, but I would take Jaylen Daniels. I think he has a relatively high floor. I'm not sure that I really believe in him. I do think that Drake May should have been the second overall pick, and I think he will have an uphill battle with this roster around him. But I still believe, at least in the upside and the talent of Jaylen Daniels. Well, I'm pretty confident Daniel Jones is not a franchise quarterback. He's not the guy. I think Brian Daboll has done a decent job getting the most out of him that he can, but I'm just not confident that he deserves to be ranked above Jaylen Daniels, even though, Daniels is a rookie and hasn't played a snap. There's a reason he was the second overall pick. So I get it if you put Daniels last just because he hasn't played yet, but based on my film evaluations of Jaylen Daniels, I do think he is going to be better for this upcoming season than Daniel Jones. So that's why I have that there. Then the running back position. This running back division is terrible. We are going to go with the Eagles at number 1. They poached Saquon Barkley from the division rival, the Giants. I definitely think he's the best running back in this division when he's healthy. I do think he is a really good running back. So I definitely think he deserves to have this top spot, especially compared to the rest of the running backs in this division. It really is pretty dreadful. And next up, we are going to have the Commanders, and that's kind of partially by default, but I at least do believe in some of their guys. Austin Eckler, we'll see. He looks like he was really running out of gas last year. He didn't look like the same back that was incredibly productive for the Chargers in the past. So maybe he is able to kind of rekindle that fire and be a nice productive player. But I think he's more kind of going to be a change of pace back. Brian Robinson Jr. at least has shown some flashes at times. He's a big bruising runner. So, I do think he has potential at least. And then you've got Chris Rodriguez, a couple other guys in that room that I don't mind as well. This just is not a very strong division when it comes to running back. So that is going to be good enough to get them in second. And then the Giants and the Cowboys both kind of have just messes at running back. For the Giants, I am going to go with them next here. Devin Singletary was incredibly productive for the Texans last season. I think coming over in a role where he can just be a consistent back. You've got Eric Gray, who is a 5th-round pick out of Oklahoma there, as well as Tyrone Tracy, who drafted late in the 5th round as well, out of Purdue, who is just kind of learning the position. I do at least believe in some of the upside at this spot for the Giants, compared to the Cowboys, who are going to come in last. I really thought that they would be drafting a running back in this draft, and they really didn't get anyone, which leaves them with a very barren running back room. They re-signed Ezekiel Elliott, who has looked well past his prime for a couple of years now. And beyond that, I mean, you've got Deuce Vaughn, Rico Dowdle. Like, these guys are just not playmakers. And so I think they're very clearly fourth in the division at the running back spot. That'll take us to wide receivers, though, and there's some really good wide receivers in this division. You think A.J. Brown, Ceedee Lamb, Terry McLaurin, Devonta Smith. There's some talent in this division. I'm going to go with the Eagles at number 1. I think that A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith is a fantastic number 1, number 2 combination. I think you can absolutely make the argument that Ceedee Lamb is the best wide receiver in the division, but I don't think any of these other teams can compare to the 1-2 that the Eagles have. That gives them number 1 quarterback, running back, and wide receiver in this division, but I do think that it's pretty clear that the Eagles have a well-built roster, so I don't think it's overly surprising at all that we see them at number 1 for wide receiver as well. They've also got Paris Campbell, Johnny Wilson, Anais Smith, Devontae Parker, some depth guys that could produce for them as well. So I have them at number 1. And then we have the Cowboys at number 2. I love Ceedee Lamb. He really exploded this year and put up insane numbers. When you look at just kind of his totals for the season, it is very impressive what he was able to do. Had 1,859 yards, 12 touchdowns, a 90.9 PFF grade. He was really just showing his ability to separate, has 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons, and his touchdown numbers continue to climb as well as his yards as well. So I think he's really ascending. He's taking that next step. Brandon Cooks was productive as well. I mean, he's not that consistent 1,000-yard receiver that he once was, but I still think he is, a decent player for them. And I think that's enough to get them in this number 2 spot. Jalen Tolbert showed some things here and there at times. Kevontae Turpin's a great kick returner, but I think that for the most part, it's pretty clear that they are number 2 in this division. Though I love Terry McLaurin. I also think he deserves a ton of credit. I think he's one of the more underrated wide receivers in the NFL. I think he's borderline top 10. But that is really impressive with some of the amazing wide receivers out there in the NFL right now. You've got him, and then Jahan Dotson, first-round pick. He looked promising as a rookie, was really bad this past year, so maybe he's able to kind of get out of that sophomore slump and really kind of elevate his game going into year 3. De'Ami Brown, Dax Milne, other guys on this roster as well that have shown some things here and there. They also drafted Luke McCaffrey, who I thought was an overdraft, but still getting another slot weapon in there in the 3rd round is never a bad thing to add more weapons. Then the Giants in last place here. I think Malik Nabers is going to be fantastic. He was my number 4 graded player in this draft, so I'm very confident that he is going to be a great player for the Giants. But right now, you can't put him above some of the other great talent in this division. I think he has a chance to be up there with the guys like Ceedee Lamb and A.J. Brown, Terry McLaurin, but he hasn't proven it quite yet, so you can't put them too high, especially when the other guys on their roster, Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, Allen Robinson, a lot of guys there, nobody that's really broken out or proven to be a super dangerous, reliable contributor. I think they all give you plays here and there, but it's a very crowded wide receiver room. They need somebody to really elevate it. I think Nabers could be that player, but they've really got to see it here first in order for them to climb these ranks. At tight end, I am going to go with the Eagles once again at number 1. Dallas Goedert has been a very productive player for quite a while now. I think that he is very clearly one of the better tight ends in the NFL. I'd say he's a top 8 tight end, maybe top 5. I think it kind of changes. Tight ends productivity definitely changes quite a bit. But Grant Calcaterra was another player coming out of SMU and formerly Oklahoma that I loved. They got him late due to injury concerns, but I think he's a nice number 2 option. You've got Albert O, CJ Uzama, other guys in there that I think are decent contributors, but Dallas Goedert is the main reason they're number 1. He's just a great player all around. He's a dangerous weapon over the middle of the field. He's pretty much the number 3 option when it comes to this passing offense. So definitely think he is a great player there. Then looking at a guy that really broke out last year is Jake Ferguson for the Cowboys. He did an excellent job replacing Dalton Schultz. I really like Jake Ferguson's game. He was one of the guys that I predicted to break out for the 2023 season. I would certainly say that happened. He had 854 yards, 8 touchdowns, was incredibly productive for them. They also have Luke Schoonmaker, who is out of Michigan. I thought they overdrafted him, but he's another piece in that tight end room. So once again, I feel the Cowboys are very clearly number 2, which seems to be a theme. Besides running back, it's the Eagles, then the Cowboys in this division. Then I'm going to go with the Commanders up next, and this is fully because of Ben Sinnott, who I really liked coming out of Kansas State. He finished as my tight end 2 in this draft, and, I loved that selection that they had for him. You also have Zach Ertz, who is definitely getting up there in age, was not very productive, but was dealing with injuries, so maybe you can still get something out of him. It's really my belief in Ben Sinnott and the major question marks over the Giants tight end room right now. Darren Waller has been considering retirement, and he really hasn't committed fully whether he's going to be playing this upcoming season. Behind him, you've got Daniel Bellinger, Theo Johnson, who you drafted this year. I wasn't the biggest fan of Theo Johnson, but, those are some of your options in the tight end room. I think if Waller does play, you probably bump them above the Commanders, but there's just a lot of uncertainty with that room. I believe in Ben Sinnott a lot, so that's why I do give the nod to the Commanders there. And then, once again, rounding out the offense, the Eagles remain in number 1 on the offensive line. They're not the same offensive line that they were once. Jason Kelce retires. They have lost some pieces, but you've still got Jordan Mailata, who is a great left tackle. Landon Dickerson is a great player. Cam Jurgens, I was super high on. He's taking over that starting center role, which they've been grooming him for ever since Kelce was getting up there in age. Lane Johnson, if he stays healthy, is still one of the best right tackles in the NFL, and you've got Mekhi Becton as insurance behind him. There's really just the question mark at right guard with Tyler Steen. He was a 3rd-round pick out of Alabama. I think he'll fit in really nicely in this offensive line, but they continue to just add to this room, and it continues to be a strength of this roster. So I think it's very clear that they are number 1 here, especially with a lot of the question marks that these other teams have. But once again, the Cowboys are going to finish 2nd in offensive line. Tyler Smith, I'm very confident in. He has developed so well. Whether they keep him at left guard, kick him out to tackle, I am confident that he's going to be a good player. Zach Martin continues to be, one of the best guards in the game. He's just ageless and has consistently played at that level for feels like a decade now. Tyler Guyton is a huge question mark for me. I was really low on him. So, the Cowboys were the one place that I felt that he could actually go and probably develop and do well because they've proven they can do that. But there's a lot of question marks for me at the tackle spots. Guyton, Terrence Steele, I think both of them have shown a lot of inconsistencies. Then Brock Hoffman is currently slotted to start at center. Maybe Cooper Beebe starts as well. He was a guard at Kansas State, and I really liked him. But maybe he plays some center. Who knows? I do think that there's just question marks on the tackle spots, center spot. So the Cowboys do have some big holes, but I still think that Tyler Smith, Zach Martin are just absolute beasts on the offensive line. So that is what gets them to number 2. The Giants are number 3, and, it feels like their offensive line should be pretty decent this year. Andrew Thomas is great left tackle, again, when he's able to stay healthy. You've got John Runyon, who brought in at left guard. He's a perfectly average replacement level guard, but he's better than what they've had for sure. He's decent. John Michael Schmitz at center, I really liked that pick when they made it. He was a rookie last year. I thought he showed some decent things. Jermaine Illuminor, he brought in from the Raiders, played right tackle, probably going to play guard for you. I think that was a solid pickup. And a lot of this kind of comes down to Evan Neal. Top 10 pick, was terrible in year 2. He was dealing with injuries, so maybe that was part of it, but he definitely kind of has to figure that out because if he can, this offensive line can be, average to maybe even above average, but they definitely need that right tackle spot to be solidified, and it comes down to Evan Neal living up to his potential. And then I think very clearly the Commanders are at number 4, and I will say this is probably my biggest concern with Jaylen Daniels in his rookie year. You've got Cornelius Lucas currently slated to start at left tackle, maybe Brandon Coleman, your draft pick, starts there, but either way, that's a big question mark. Nick Allegretti or Chris Paul starts at left guard. Scary. You've got Sam Cosmi, Andrew Wiley, Tyler Biadasz. These are fine players. I have concerns about Andrew Wiley. Cosmi's decent, but this offensive line just is a lot of question marks and a lot of players that you're just not very confident are going to be very good. So I think the Commanders are very clearly number 4. Moving to the defense now, looking at edge rushers, this division has some elite edge rush units. And this one is going to start not with the Eagles. We're going to go with the Cowboys here. Micah Parsons is one of the best edge rushers in the NFL. His just pure athleticism, power, bend, elusiveness, motor, like he is one of the toughest guys in the NFL to block. So I think him along with DeMarcus Lawrence, Sam Williams, who has some juice out of Ole Miss, I like him. This is a really, really talented edge rush room. You also drafted Marshawn Kneeland out of Western Michigan, who had some nice speed to power opportunities as well. Like, this is a deep and really high-end talent edge rush room, and I definitely think the Cowboys deserve to be at the top of this list. And then at number 2, I'm actually going to go with the Giants here. For the Giants, you bring in Brian Burns as a second-round pick. I definitely think that was well worth it. When he's at his best, one of the bendiest, long, elusive edge rushers that can turn the corner and really disrupt the quarterback. Had 9 sacks last year, 13 the year before. So, he's definitely a really nice player. Pairing him with Kayvon Thibodeau, who I thought had a nice sophomore season as well, I definitely think that you can make the argument that this is a very high potential edge rush room, and it's very, very talented already. Thibodeau had some ups and downs, but he had 13 sacks last year. This is a really good number 1, number 2 guy. And then, you've also got Azeez Ojulari, who was a second-round pick, Boogie Basham, who you get from Buffalo. There's some guys on this defensive line, and I really like that 1-2 duo for them. The Eagles, certainly nothing to laugh at either on the edge position. You've got guys, you end up trading Hassan Reddick, but you've got Bryce Huff you bring in from the Jets. Huff has been a really nice player for the Jets, kind of in that rotational pass rush role that pretty much everybody has been saying he needs to start. He is so dynamic and productive. Why is he not getting more snaps? So he'll definitely have the opportunity to prove his worth here for the Eagles. They trade Reddick, but you've still got some really nice players. Brandon Graham, Jalen Hunt, who you drafted as well, and Josh Sweat. Nolan Smith was a first-round pick that I loved as well, who you got at the very end of day 1. That's a very deep room. They need some of these guys to step up and be true number 1 edge rushers, and it's a really good room. They would be number 1 or number 2 in a lot of divisions, but the Cowboys, the Giants both have great duos and great top-end players as well. So that just kind of kicks the Eagles down to number 3, even if they are really talented in that room as well. And then we move to the Commanders, who, for a long time had Montez Sweat and Chase Young, which was one of the most fun edge rush rooms in the NFL. Get rid of both of them, now you've got a really underwhelming group. Dorrance Armstrong, Cleveland Farrell, KJ Henry, Dante Fowler. That's terrible. It might be the worst edge rush room in the NFL. So most definitely it's last in this loaded division. But the Commanders roster, when you look at it kind of up and down, it's not very strong. And I'll be curious to see how they do this year with Jaylen Daniels at the helm. I just don't have a lot of faith in the roster around them. But moving to interior defensive line, I actually have the Commanders at number 1. It's a really good unit, and you've got Jonathan Allen, who is one of the best interior players in the NFL. He can rush the passer. He's a great run stuffer. Daron Payne has turned into a great player as well. He's a great nose tackle, run stuffer type. Phidarian Mathis was a second-round pick who was overdrafted, but still definitely provides value. And then you've got Jerzon Newton, who definitely fell due to injuries. But if the injuries check out, I think he was, well worth a top 12 selection. So to get him in the second round was an absolute steal. And I love the interior room of the Commanders. There's not a lot else that I love about this roster, but defensive tackles, they're an excellent, excellent group for the Commanders. And then at number 2, I'm going to go with the Giants. And this is because I think that Dexter Lawrence is at least one of the 3 best defensive tackles in the NFL. Now that Aaron Donald has retired, I think he's probably the most complete against the run, against the pass. He's just so dominant in the middle of that defense. And, he has truly developed into a just complete monster that is impossible to block. He's so good in both aspects of the game. You look at him, he had a 92.9 PFF grade, had 6 sacks, had 9 the year before, but he's so effective in the run game as well. And, I love him. He's one of my favorite players to watch on the interior. And then, besides that, you don't have a lot. Jordan Phillips is all right. Raheem Nunez-Roches, coming over from Tampa Bay, had some moments for them. There's not a lot behind Dexter Lawrence and Jordan Phillips, but Dexter Lawrence is truly one of the best in the business. So he gets them up to number 2. Then we've got the Eagles at number 3, and, it's hard to put this Eagles unit at number 3, kind of like for their edge rush spot. I wouldn't be mad if you put them above the Giants. I take super high-end talent, but this Eagles roster definitely has the depth. You've got Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter. Both of them are great players out of Georgia. Jalen Carter, definitely turned it on in his rookie season. He showed how talented he is. Jordan Davis, great run stuffer. You've also got guys, though, like Milton Williams, who's shown some explosiveness. So I wouldn't be mad at all if you put the Eagles at number 2. It's a very talented, deep rotation within their interior as well. So a really, really strong group. Then we've got the Cowboys last, and I think that this is pretty clear. Mozzie Smith looked pretty awful as a rookie. I don't think that he was playing the right role necessarily for him. I'm not really sure what the best role for him is. I think it's probably at 3-tech if he, is able to be more of that gap penetrator. I think he's pretty bad at run defense, holding up against double teams. You've also got Osa Odigizua. You've got Chauncey Golston, Justin Rogers, who drafted in the 7th round. It's just not a great unit. I don't have a lot of faith in that interior of the defensive line for the Cowboys, and I do think the running game might be a problem for their defense this upcoming year. Then we're going to move to linebacker, and this division doesn't have great linebackers. I am going to go with the Giants at number 1 just because Bobby Okereke came over from the Colts and was super productive in his first year. I thought that he was kind of all over the ball a lot of the time. He had sacks, interceptions, forced fumbles. He was a really good tackler. Had a ton of tackles, 105 tackles in 2023. So I think he's the most complete linebacker in this division. You've also got some other guys in that room, Micah McFadden, Isaiah Simmons, still we're holding out hope for potentially. So I think that there's some guys. I do like Bobby Okereke the most of probably any linebacker in this division, which puts them at number 1. Next up in the linebacker spot, I do have the Eagles, and I think a lot of people will want to put the Eagles at number 1 because they do have kind of the flashy names. Nakobe Dean, who was kind of the leader of that Georgia defense when they were so good. You also drafted Jeremiah Trotter Jr., and of course Devin White is there. I think Devin White is probably one of the most overrated players in the entire NFL. He's fast and athletic and was a high draft pick, but he just does not understand the game of football, basically. And basically, unless you're blitzing him and just using him as a pure run and chase linebacker, I don't think he's very good. I think he has way too many negative plays. And you look at his PFF grades, and you can definitely see that as well. He had a 47.4 PFF grade, a 31.4 run defense grade, and it's not just the PFF grades. You can see it on film as well. He's very clearly very undisciplined, and I do have concerns about him. I think a lot of Eagles fans and fans all around the league really do overrate him, but still it's a decent unit, and I do think that it's a pretty weak linebacker division all in all, so that does put them at number 2. The Commanders up next, and I like some of their guys. You've got Frankie Louvu coming over from the Panthers. He was a really good player for them. I think he's solid. Bobby Wagner, definitely way past his prime, but he's still a solid run defender. He's kind of unlike Devin White. He doesn't have the athleticism anymore to be a sideline to sideline type of linebacker, but he has great run diagnosis. He can really understand what's happening in front of him, and he's still a productive player. Jamin Davis, former first-round pick. Don't think he's ever going to figure it out, but he's still on the roster as well to provide some athleticism. Then we've got the Cowboys at number 4, and you lose Leighton Vander Esch, who was definitely kind of the best linebacker on this team. Damone Clark, Eric Kendricks is way past his prime. He looked terrible on the Chargers last year. DeMarvion Overshown out of Texas is there. I don't believe a lot in this unit. It's not a great unit for me, but potentially they could move up this board just simply because the other linebacker units in front of them really aren't very good either. Moving to corner, I think it's clearly the Eagles at number 1. And, to me, I get it. The Cowboys have the flash, the stats, some of the best plays, but if you're looking at pure lockdown corners, you look at the depth and the talent in this Eagles corner room, it's really impressive. Darius Slay and James Bradbury definitely getting up there in age. Slay still looked like a solid corner. James Bradbury was not good last year, but both of those guys are still experienced players that can bring you something in that room. And then you've got Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. Both of those guys were top 10 players for me on the board this year. So getting both of them was highway robbery. Keely Ringo, I was really low on last year, but still he's a talented player. Avonte Maddox in the slot is a really good player. Eli Ricks, undrafted free agent, showed a lot of potential out of Alabama. Isaiah Rodgers also there. Josh Jobe, another talented player. Like, this is an incredibly deep room. And I have some concerns about the inconsistencies of these Dallas guys, who I will put happily at number 2. Trayvon Diggs, I definitely think, has been a lot more locked down. He, didn't play a whole lot this past year, but, you look at his interception numbers, they definitely have gone down over the years, 11 to 3 to 1, but I think he's much more consistent. He's cut down on penalties. He's cut down on giving up massive plays as well. So maybe his ball production has fallen off a little bit, but I think he's actually a much better player. And then you look at Deron Bland, who, was unbelievable for a couple of games this year. There's also some inconsistencies in coverage. And I certainly understand that when you look at it, 9 interceptions, 3 of them returned for touchdowns, 6 pass breakups, he's really shown some nice things. And I definitely think he can be a nice player, but it's just about the consistency as well. He hasn't always been great in coverage and just consistently putting it together on a down-to-down basis. So could I see the argument for the Cowboys being number 1? Absolutely. When I look for a corner, I want consistency. I want to know what I'm getting. And I don't feel like I have that with the Cowboys, although you do have the splash plays. Moving to number 3, I'm going to go with the Giants. I was huge on Deonte Banks last year. Thought he looked really good as a rookie. And then you've got Andrew Phillips, who you drafted out of Kentucky in the 3rd round this year. You've got Nick McLeod, Cordell Flott out of LSU, who's kind of more of a slot guy. Darnay Holmes as well, Aaron Robinson. Just a lot of guys, I think, besides Deonte Banks. And, we'll see what Andrew Phillips develops into. I don't think there's a lot there. I like Deonte Banks a lot, and that's what gives them the nod over the Commanders, who I don't really think have much in the back end of this defense. When you really look at the corner position, you're looking at Benjamin St-Juste, you're looking at James Pierre, Mike Sainristil was a 2nd-round pick. He's going to be your nickel, but, besides that, you've got Michael Davis. Emmanuel Forbes really struggled as a rookie, and I didn't like him a lot as a 1st-round pick. So I think there's just a lot of question marks, and I trust Deonte Banks a little bit more than anybody else that I trust on the Commanders, and I believe in the talent there as well. Then moving to safety, I am actually going to put the Commanders at number 1 here. You've got Derek Forrest, Jeremy Chin, who you brought over as well from Carolina. Percy Butler is an interesting kind of player as well, and then Quan Martin, who was a 2nd-round pick out of Illinois. He played with Devon Witherspoon and some of the great players, Sidney Brown at Illinois in that secondary. I think he'll probably play a little bit more slot, 3rd safety kind of role this year now that you drafted Mike Sainristil. So I do think that they have the most complete and probably talented safety room in this division. But moving next to number 2, we have the Cowboys. I will say I don't really love the safeties in this division. You've got Donovan Wilson and Malik Hooker on this team. I think both of those guys are decent players, and, there's nothing wrong with them necessarily. Hooker's kind of more of your deep center fielder type player. Donovan Wilson has some really good moments. I think he's a little inconsistent as well, much like a lot of this Cowboy secondary, but it's decent. And compared to the other major question marks on these other teams, I don't think it's bad at all. The Eagles, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, he's kind of that nickel slot type of player, so you can count him as either a safety or a nickel player. But behind him, you've got Reed Blankenship, Sidney Brown, Mekhi Gardner, just a lot of uncertainty there. I don't think any of those guys really stick out as really good players in the NFL that they've proven to be, at least. So we're going to put them there. And kind of the same thing with the Giants. You lose Xavier McKinney. You replace him with Tyler Nubin, who I had some concerns about just due to his lack of athleticism. I like his instincts, but the lack of athleticism is definitely concerning. Jason Pinnock you also have, and then Dane Belton out of Iowa, 2022 draft pick. There's just a lot of unknowns there as well. Jalen Mills, you also signed from New England, but I do have the Giants at number 4 in the safety slot. Now, looking at coaching last here, and, I think that this is a very tough division to rank. For me, I do have the Eagles at number 1, and it's kind of more due to the staff around the head coach there in Nick Sirianni. Sirianni, I do think, is a good coach. I think he does a great job of surrounding himself with great minds as well. You look at Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator, Vic Fangio as the defensive coordinator. You can't really build a much better staff than that. So I definitely think that Howie Roseman and Sirianni deserve credit for building that staff. I'm not sure that I would say Sirianni is one of the best coaches in the NFL necessarily, but I do think he can build a great staff, and he has done very well so far in his couple of short years with the Eagles, so he definitely deserves some credit for that. I'm going to put the Giants at number 2, and I will say I'm not a big fan of Mike McCarthy. I do think that he has been carried by Aaron Rodgers and a good Dallas roster who, we'll certainly get into that. But Brian Daboll, I think, has elevated the roster around him. Last year was bad. They dealt with a ton of injuries, quarterback especially, and I do think that he needs to have a little bit better control of his emotions sometimes. But Mike Kafka, I think, is a solid offensive coordinator. Shane Bowen, defensive coordinator there for him. I believe in Daboll, and I believe that, he deserves a chance with a real quarterback. So I do hope that they draft one this upcoming year and give him a chance to show what he can do with a really talented quarterback, because I think he has shown he can elevate Daniel Jones. But I believe in Brian Daboll and that coaching staff. I'm going to put the Cowboys and Mike McCarthy at number 3. I will say, I just think I find McCarthy arrogant, and I'm just not the biggest fan of him. But Brian Schottenheimer, Mike Zimmer back at defensive coordinator, I think should be a really interesting staff. They're a little bit more of that old school type of coaching staff, and he definitely needs to prove that he can win in the postseason, because he hasn't really done that since Rodgers basically carried him to a Super Bowl. That is going to leave the Commanders at number 4. Dan Quinn, I do think is a decent head coach, but hiring a defensive head coach for me is just putting a cap on the potential of your team. If you get a good offensive coordinator, which, they bring in Cliff Kingsbury, we'll see how that goes. It didn't work out in Arizona, but maybe as an offensive coordinator with Jaylen Daniels, he can get some stuff going and implement some of that more spread college offense. But I think that as soon as you get a good offensive coordinator, that person is going to leave and get hired as a head coach. So it just kind of limits the ceiling of this team. I was really surprised that the Commanders didn't hire Ben Johnson. But, sometimes that's just how it goes. It's not always how it works out. So I think Dan Quinn, even though he has previously been a head coach and has proven that he can be successful, I think he needs to prove it with this roster and with this team before he's ranked above that there. So this NFC East division certainly has some passionate fan bases. So let me know your thoughts down below. What did I get wrong? What did I get right? If you like these kind of videos, please hit the like button down below. It's just a free and easy way to support my channel. Truly means the world to me and lets me know that you like content just like this. While you're down there, hit the subscribe button as well. We're on the quest for 5,000 subscribers. I would truly appreciate your support. Thank you so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one.